Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Had a whole bunch of people send me this story, including JP. Thank you very much. It's out of Florida, widely reported. This version is from Fox 13 News. Florida man arrested for DUI on a lawnmower along toll road. According to the police there, man faces charges after troopers say he took his riding mower onto a busy toll road while impaired. That's the allegation. Now, according to Florida Highway Patrol, dispatchers started getting calls from witnesses, multiple witnesses, around 8:30 a.m. That is in the morning, my friends, Friday, reporting a man operating a lawnmower erratically on the southbound side of the Suncoast Parkway, which is State Road 589. Now, the question, of course, is if he'd been operating the lawnmower non-erratically, it probably still would have caused some people to get concerned, but he was allegedly operating the lawnmower erratically on the southbound side. Troopers say traffic cameras showed the lawnmower going south from Citrus County into Hernando County, and the rider was pulled over just south of the exit to US 98. So he's traveling from one county to the next. Florida Highway Patrol says the man's 38 years old. He showed some signs of impairment, that is physical signs, including the way his eyes looked, flushed skin, suffering from dry mouth, and visible irritation to the inside of his nose. Now, I'm not familiar with that one, but I've heard of the other ones. The man also is said to have had a small blue straw in his back pocket and repeatedly cleared his throat, sniffed, and was spitting during the traffic stop. Not at or on anybody, but I think they found the behavior unusual. So the troopers say the man refused to perform field sobriety exercises, and so he was then arrested on a charge of driving under the influence. And in many states, you may know, the refusal to perform the exercises if there's probable cause, likewise, can be another charge. So we don't know exactly all that he's been charged with, but he was released Friday afternoon from jail on a bond of $500. So now, we've talked recently about drunk driving and the places where you can get a ticket drunk driving. It's no question if you're on the roadway, a public roadway such as the Suncoast Parkway, yeah, that's a place where you can get a ticket for doing a traffic violation. However, the interesting part here, of course, is the tractor. The tractor. He's on a lawnmower, lawn tractor. And here's the thing. I've heard of this before. This is not the first tractor story. I don't think it's the first one done on this channel, but it's certainly not the first one I've heard of. In fact, there was one in Michigan where somebody was on a tractor about 3 miles from one of my old offices, and they'd taken a tractor to the store apparently to buy some more alcohol, but somebody called the police. Now, here's the interesting thing. You might say, Steve, is there a possibility there's some kind of loophole here because he was not in a car, but he's on a tractor? Some kind of loophole maybe? Well, no, because they've anticipated these things. So I went and pulled the Florida statutes, and 316.193 says the definition of driving under the influence. A person is guilty of the offense of driving under the influence and is subject to punishment as provided below if the person is driving or in actual physical control of a vehicle within this state and under the influence. The question then becomes, is a tractor a vehicle? Now, notice it says vehicle. It doesn't say motor vehicle. It says vehicle. But it does say, if they're in actual physical control, then if they're under the influence, they're driving under the influence. So then elsewhere, you can find two definitions of significance. 320.01 says, under the general definitions section, motor vehicle means an automobile, motorcycle, truck, trailer, semi-trailer, truck, tractor, and semi-trailer combination, or any other vehicle operated on the roads of the state. Well, clearly it's not an automobile, motorcycle, truck, trailer, so it would have to be an other vehicle. And the question is, what's an other vehicle? It does say an other vehicle used to transport persons or property and propelled by power other than muscular power. So a bicycle would not be in this definition here. So the question then is this in fact another vehicle? Well, believe it or not, there's another definition of just the word vehicle. Because remember, that was the motor vehicle definition, but here we're talking about vehicle. A vehicle, and this is sub 46. Vehicle means every device in, upon, or by which any person or property is or may be transported or drawn upon a public highway or operated upon rails or guideway, except a bicycle, motorized wheelchair, or electric bicycle. So again, a device upon which a person or property is or may be transported or drawn upon a public highway. So can a person be transported upon a tractor? Yes. Is it a vehicle? Yes. So getting back to, if the person is driving or an actual physical control of a vehicle, and they're doing that on a roadway, that can constitute operating under the influence. So that's pretty straightforward. Like I said, I've seen other versions. I seem to recall doing one not so long ago. I did a video on this, I'm pretty sure, where a guy was driving one of those Power Wheels. It's a toy, pretty cool toy. A little miniature Jeep that a kid can sit in and drive, and I think they're rechargeable. And I seem to recall that a guy got busted in one of those, operating it while intoxicated. Not in Florida, I don't think, but I could be wrong on that. And I've heard of other examples. We've also famously heard stories about people like on horseback. And ironically, many people point out, and I tend to agree with this, that a horse, because horses are pretty smart and are aware of the fact that there's someone on their back and that they're walking along or trotting along someplace, the horse will, on some level, take steps to protect itself, more so than a lawnmower, okay? So a lawnmower isn't going to make decisions for you about should we turn left, right, or go straight. A horse might. A horse might. And I've heard people say, Steve, I knew a guy who had a horse where he could fall asleep on his back and wake up and he'd be home, tucked into bed. No. And so on horseback's a different question altogether. But again, you'll notice that horseback wouldn't qualify as a vehicle here either. Okay, so I want to just point that out. I'm simply talking about all the different things in different areas where I've heard of people getting arrested, in essence, for operating while under the influence, and what types of things they've been on or in when they did that. And so I seem to recall also hearing stories about people in construction equipment, like excavators or skid steers or things like that. And it's going to vary wildly from state to state and how your state defines these things. But a lot of people do occasionally ask me about this. And they'll say, hey, Steve, I just read the statute on driving under the influence in my state. And it says a person is guilty if they're doing this, that, or the other thing in a vehicle. But they don't, it doesn't say what a vehicle is. Usually it does, but just somewhere else. So many statutes have got definition sections at the front. It'll say, in this statute, the following definitions apply. And so the first place you always look is at that statute to see if it contains definitions. Now, when you're in a state like Florida or Michigan or Indiana, and you're looking up the statutes, if you don't find the definition in that particular statute, you do look to see if it's defined anywhere else. And it may or may not be. And so once in a while, there'll be a word that they don't bother to define because they think it's so obvious what the meaning is. But here they have purposely defined motor vehicle and vehicle. And the different statutes that address driving are going to talk about whether it's a motor vehicle or simply a vehicle. Notice they're using the broader vehicle for drunk driving. The question is, like, what do they do on speeding, for instance? Do speeding laws address vehicles or motor vehicles, and so on? And so you look at the statute and look for the definitional section and see what it says. The definition section in a statute will always be the definitions that the court should follow. And so you can argue about the meanings of things to an extent if they're not defined in the statute, but quite often they are. And as you can imagine, one of the most litigated sections of any vehicle code in any state is the drunk driving stuff for two reasons. One is that when people get arrested with it and charged with it, they often fight those charges because it's very, very serious. And the other reason is that these laws have been changed a lot lately in the last 30 years. So I've been practicing law for 34 years now. And I've seen these laws in Michigan and other states that are constantly updated, revised, updated, revised. And every time they revise it or update it, it encourages another onslaught of challenges to see whether these things are written correctly and fairly and so on. So there you go. But yeah, it's I'll admit, not much of a story, but JP pointed out, he said, yeah, to me, what caught my attention was it happened at 8:30 in the morning. And that's when I realized, yes, actually, don't get me wrong. A lot of people might get a little tipsy on a Friday, but 8:30 in the morning on a Friday? So some people are going to call it out and say, yeah, but it's also Florida man, because the first two words are Florida man arrested for DUI on lawnmower along toll road. The question I have is, did he pay the toll? Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Nothing haunts us like the things we don't say.